we're next going to hear to talk about agriculture, and to talk about the outlook for agriculture, we have joining us Professor, let me get his title right, Professor and Extension Specialist in the Department of Agricultural Economics and Economics at Montana State University. Would you please join me welcoming George Haynes. George.
Thank you very much, Pat. We at Montana State and the Ag Econ Department and Economics really value this partnership that we have in collaborating with the Bureau and doing these economic seminars, and appreciate the opportunity to do the agricultural piece of this. Let me tell you just a little bit about agriculture in general, and then we'll get into some more specifics here, but it's a little bit like Lake Wobegon, a little bit like the children in Lake Wobegon, in that most of agriculture is kind of above average these days. The story has a couple components to it that are very important, though. Our grain people are a little happier these days than our livestock people are, which Paul alluded to in his remarks. And we'll dig into that just a little bit more as we go through these slides. The highlights for last year in Montana are kind of summarized here with one other piece I'll add to this. Last year was a really exceptional year in Montana. I don't know if you know about, this time of the year last year, wheat prices were just out of sight, and they went further out of sight in February as the Indian government entered the market to buy some additional wheat. In addition to that, we had a very high production year here last year. We started off with not a very good wheat crop last winter because we didn't have much snow. But it turned out by the end of the summer we had some very good growing conditions, so we had really an exceptional crop with a lot of additional acres planted last year because prices were relatively high. So in general, we've had a couple good years in agriculture here. In the grain side has been particularly good. The story on the second point on this graph is a little bit more complicated because we have this linkage, which I've talked about the last couple of years I've been here, between energy and agricultural commodities. And of course, the big item out there is corn. And corn remains the big item as we look at the advancements in kind of the biofuels. The important thing to remember here is that agriculture is largely a public policy driven sort of business. We think about markets in agriculture, but we really are subject to a lot of policy issues. One of them is with respect to ethanol these days. For those of you that don't know, former Governor Vilsack from Iowa is really a pretty staunch supporter of ethanol in biofuels in general. So even though the subsidy rate on ethanol has been lowered from 45 cents down to 51, the other way from 51 to 45, we expect some additional interest in ethanol. There's a lot of interest in seeing this technology develop to the next level. Using grain ethanol may not be the answer, but certainly going to see some money put into those pots. The item that's missing up here, we also have a new farm bill, and I want to talk about one piece of that. Even though you're going to hear most of the rhetoric that's out there on the farm bill will be around new subsidies for farmers, and those are substantial. We have some new revenue programs out there, and I, having been in the computer business before, would like to have a program that would guarantee my revenue from one year to the next also. But farmers now have that in place if they want to sign on to the program. The second and most important part for economic development, though, is that we at Montana State have a big focus this year on new farmer-rancher programs. There's a big incentive out there for any of you that decided you've had enough of the city that you'd like to go out and begin farming. And this is a new USDA programs that allow you to borrow essentially $500,000 to go out and get in the farming business. The federal government puts up $225,000 of that, and your local bank puts up another $250,000, which the federal government guarantees for them, and you come up with $25,000, and boom, you're in the farming business. So there's going to be a lot of focus this year, at least within what goes on with USDA, in trying to encourage more younger farmers to get in the business. So a really important part of the Farm Bill that you probably won't hear a great deal about because but I think has some potential here in Montana. So what about the outlook for this coming year? I think that we're pretty optimistic, actually, with what we see happening. And the grain markets look pretty good. Again, everything is above average. Prices are still pretty good in the grain markets. Everybody has their eyes on what's going on in China and India. It wasn't so long ago that the Indian government wasn't sure they were going to have enough food. In fact, a year ago, to feed their population, they entered the markets and caused some real disruptions there, important disruptions for Montana farmers because wheat prices just went to historical highs. On the cattle side of the house, there's some big issues that are before us. Probably the most important one for a lot of our producers here is this brucellosis issue. That is finally getting resolved. The only problem is that we're going to live in this brucellosis issue that we have for at least another year because once the plan is in place, in the plan being that Montana will now be in 2 separate brucellosis districts in the state. Once that plan is in place, we have to wait a year before we will be able to change the rules with respect to how we have to handle cattle as a result of this brucellosis problem here. The other issues, for those of you that own horses, I imagine some of you do, you know what hay prices are like. We had the smallest inventories of hay last May. Historically in the United States, it drove hay prices through the ceiling. We're seeing hay prices even now in $125 a ton and up to $200, which is just extremely high prices for hay. In my own mind, I think maybe the bottom item here is the most important. We're in these financially challenging times right now, and consumer demand, especially on the beef side, is a big issue, and I'll talk just a little bit more about that in a minute. Montana, from the agricultural grain side of the house, we're a wheat state. We don't do much of it over here in Missoula County, but you don't have to go very far east of here. And this is kind of what we do in Montana, produce a lot of wheat and some barley and then some other things. This is what the financial picture looks like for the state of Montana for this year. If you look over on the far right, you can see that it looks like from a sales perspective, and this is only sales data here, it's going to be at least a record year, a very good year in the 90s. You'll notice that it used to be that the livestock and the crop sectors used to kind of split things in half. Right now, that's changed substantially because of all these high grain prices. So our grain people are contributing more to this sales picture than our cattle and cattle people are. The important part about this is only part of the story. Even though we had all these high sales volumes last year, we also had very high prices in the of inputs. And this is what this shows. If you look on the far right of that graph, this is what our net farm income projections look like for the year. And they aren't very different than they were a year ago. And boy, you have to go back a long time before these farmers had a really boomer year. It goes back into the early 70s. I grew up in central Montana, and I still know some producers out there still driving pickups that were of the 1970s vintage. So it's been a long time, and one thing that's important for you to keep in mind with agriculture, it's a really high wealth sort of business because land values are up there as well now. But it's a relatively low income business. Even though they have a lot of wealth, there's not a lot of money to spend oftentimes, and this graph kind of shows that. So what's been going on? Well, I'm going to show you some price data and then some production data, and you'll notice they kind of are running against one another here. We had winter wheat prices were relatively high a year ago, and they've gone down substantially. In fact, the little dot that's farthest on the right, that's local prices right now. We're not expecting them to stay quite that low, but they're very low. Montana wheat production's up a little bit. That was, and we anticipate in this next year that it's going to even out a little bit. In fact, winter wheat production, the early estimates are it might be down just slightly because plantings are down. Spring wheat, again, prices have tailed off some. And again, maybe we don't expect them to stay quite that low as we get into the fall, but they've tailed off some, at least early. Spring wheat production was up a little bit last year. Probably see it about stable or maybe up just a little bit this year. Barley, same story of, prices are down, even though, historically they look very good. The barley production may be increasing just a little bit, and a lot of this driven by what's going on in the corn markets. When you look at these futures prices, which you can look at if you grab a copy of the Wall Street Journal, or I think the Great Falls Tribune is probably the closest newspaper here that reports these on a daily basis, but you can look at these numbers that are over here on the far right, really make the most difference to us. Anytime on those grain markets where those things are up in that $5 and $6 range, most agricultural producers here are reasonably happy with those things. And you notice they're all up in that range. The one thing that you need to look at the bottom of the picture here, though, is something we don't do much of in Montana. We don't grow much corn here. Even though if you drove from Billings to Sydney last summer, you would have noticed a lot of corn being grown in the state. But this impacts us a lot here in the state of Montana. When these corn prices are up around $4, our grain prices are going to be about $6 or thereabouts, because corn sets a base for our grain market, because there's a point in there where you can afford to feed wheat to cattle. And that's about where we're at with corn prices at this level. So when corn prices are in that $4 range, we're going to see a floor on our grain markets. Now that's good for our grain producers, but not so good for our guys on the cattle side of the house, because as these grain prices are relatively high, their cost of production is high, and they're not going to be willing to pay us as much for our calves here in Montana. And they're going through a lot of that, as I speak. What's happened in the international market, when we talk about grain, we really dance on an international stage. We're always, really agricultural economists really only become sophisticated weathermen because we're looking at what's the weather patterns throughout the world. This is what happened last year. We had record low stocks a year ago in record high prices, and boy, did the world respond to that. Look at the European Union. If you can see EU-27 up there, that's the European Union. They essentially opened up all their set-aside acreage for their farmers to plant, and the production went up by 21%. Worldwide, we went from about 603 million metric tons to a little over 680 million metric tons, and everything's good. All of our supplies have been rebuilt. Our supplies in the United States are almost 100% larger than they were a year ago. So, but notice the United States is becoming a relatively smaller portion of world markets as we go through time. We're about 10% of world markets currently. So what happened? Well, we had a substantially higher, as I say, higher wheat production. Ending stocks are looking like they're very good. We're optimistic here in the United States, at least from a consumer perspective, because we've had this high wheat production yields, and again, our wheat stocks have followed international trends. With the international trade in wheat, which is an important thing for us in Montana, we grow a lot of product here, but we ship most of it out. We're a little worried because it looks like these markets are likely to decline for a couple of reasons. One of them is the dollar's getting a lot stronger, so our products become much more expensive overseas. And secondly, the pretty good production numbers from most other parts of the world. I just heard this morning Argentina's having some production problems, but one of the few. So what do I think for 2009? Our winter wheat plantings, like I said earlier, are down just a little bit, although the quality of our winter wheat crop is much better because we've actually had some snow in eastern Montana this year. We expect prices to be a little bit softer early in the year, maybe firm up and get a little bit higher as we get into the year a little bit further. But the thing that's hanging out there is how these developing economies are going to perform, and especially with respect to India and China. And then again, what are weather conditions likely to be throughout the world? And obviously, those are things I'm not willing to predict. Okay, what about the cattle market or the livestock market in Montana? We're largely a cattle state. We have some hogs that are growing here, but only on the Hutterite reservation, or Hutterite colonies, here. Cattle numbers, Montana up just slightly. U.S. cattle inventory is actually down just a little bit, but they've remained very stable. And this is a market that's in a fair bit of uncertainty right now. They're not kind of sure where these markets are likely to go, and we'll talk about that here in just a sec. Calf prices are the big worry in Montana. We don't really fatten many cattle here, nor we do background many of them. We basically sell most of them onto the market and send them south of here. Calf prices are down, and we're likely to see these calf prices move somewhat lower. These futures prices, again, we look out to the far side of this to the right to see what we expect out, through December of next year. And the number that you really care about, really, for Montana is the bottom one on these feeder cattle. And this gives us a pretty good gauge of about where our calves are selling. And we expect these to trend just a little bit lower as we get into the year. But, again, on a historical basis, we're still above average, even though we're not as good as we've been the last couple of years, even in the cattle market. So the big issues that I talked about before, brucellosis, hopefully we're at the end of this problem. It producers that ship cattle out of state have to have all these calves tested, and before they ship them, it costs about $5 or $6 a head to do that. Higher hay and grain prices are really critical. We would expect, if these continue, we're going to see smaller cattle inventories here in Montana. Right now, cattle Owners are having a very difficult decision deciding whether they want to overwinter their cows or sell them because they can make so much money selling their hay. Same within the feeder and the feeder stocker market. That's really our calf market. We're having to bring heavier weight calves to the market because corn prices are so high. But again, having hay prices up there, it's depressing that just a bit. And of course, the thing at the bottom here is this ethanol effect, and we ought to really call it ethanol/biofuels effect. Because there's certainly going to continue to impact markets in Montana, and I think given Governor Vilsack, or now Secretary Vilsack's position on ethanol, it's going to be a very interesting market to watch here from a public policy perspective. So, likely on the cattle side, reasonably good prices, but I think a declining market in calves as we get into the fall. The consumer demand piece that I alluded to before really concerns me a lot because as we see this economic downturn hit, we see that restaurants and those sorts of businesses are likely to quit buying beef or as much beef. That's a problem for Montana. We raise very high quality beef here. People like to buy the steaks and other things that produce out of our high quality Montana cattle. That's likely to have some impact on quality. This is where quality can actually work against us as an agricultural enterprise rather than for us. In the last little piece here, we continue to think at MSU at least that there's room for a lot of expansion in the cattle business. But I'll tell you right now, with these prices such as they are, and we've really gone through some 3 or 4 years here where we haven't had very good grazing conditions in the summer, that herd rebuilding is going to take some time. And of course, the bottom, can't end this section without talking about corn one more time because, with corn and the value of corn, there's a lot of acres that's being traded out for corn these days. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the ag sector. Yeah.
There's a downward pressure on cattle because of the price of corn and feedstuff. But on the other side, internationally, there's an increasing consumption of protein and meat that's developing countries as middle class worldwide, billions of people. Do you think that's Montana will be able to start to challenge any international market for cattle?
Okay, excellent question. There's a question about with cattle prices maybe trending down here just a little bit. There's a much higher demand for protein as these developing economies have more money to spend. In effect, really critical question. What's the challenge that we're having on the beef side is just getting beef into some of these countries. Because they've maybe the classic cases with South Korea where we had some entrance into that market and over time we actually lost that completely. And when we went back into the Korean market, they'd already developed some of their own beef sector there, so they were already picking up some of that demand. So it's a continual challenge for us to go out and market our U.S. beef into these international markets and effectively compete there. So, but you're right, as they grow, you would expect protein demand to go up, and certainly our cattle people are looking at trying to market more effectively there.
Question
Yeah.
over here.
What impacts does the country of origin labeling have? There's been a lot of discussion over the years. Is there a positive impact on Montana producers, a negative impact? Has there been much impact at all from the?
Well, there's a question about the COOL legislation, the country of origin labeling legislation that's out there, and what kind of impact does that have in Montana? It's actually kind of a mixed story right now. Because on one hand, you hear this story, and there's actually some evidence out there that the retailers would prefer to not have any country of origin labeling, just so they can sell this kind of common commodity without any interference from the labeling. On the other side of the house, though, there is a story that suggests that country of origin labeling may be a big thing for us because there may be a demand out there in the market where people want to buy beef that's been raised, fattened and slaughtered here in the United States, and there actually might be a premium for those cuts of meats rather than meats that come in from Uruguay or Australia or wherever else. And so, kind of the jury's kind of out on that yet. But my own personal opinion is I think there might be some reason to be optimistic about it for Montana or for our producers here, because I think there is some reason to believe that a Montana branded product or a U.S. branded product might have be able to command a somewhat higher price in the market, but the jury's kind of out on that.
One more question, you have time. Yes, sir.
Could the element notice on your 20, 30 years credit for grain, livestock, you said that prices have changed all that much. If we go down to
Okay, that's a great question. With you notice on our commodity prices, if you look over long periods of time, and all these were adjusted for inflation that I showed you here, that there's not a lot of difference as you move from one year to the next. And the reality of it is that most of the price of a product that you're buying in the grocery store here is other things apart from the commodity itself. You know, you're paying for the labor and the transportation, et cetera, too, in the manufacturing of the product to get it there. And you're right, it hasn't. It hasn't filtered down to the farm, and the remarkable part of it is that farming has been a business where if people haven't moved along with the technology, they've just gone out of business. Because you're not making any more money on your product now than you did back in the 1970s, but if you've moved along with the technology, you're producing a lot more of it. So it's been very interesting in that respect. But it just, you know, largely the changes in the market price are other factors.
Great. Well, I think we better close it there. George may be available during the break to take some additional questions. George, thank you very much. We have a lot of content in this program, as you know, but I think there's some good content left to come. And would like to talk about one more industry that is very important here in western Montana, important statewide really, and that is talking about the outlook for Montana's manufacturing and forest products industries. And so I'm delighted to have joining us right now the Bureau's Director of Forest Industry Research. Would you please welcome Todd Morgan.
Thanks, Pat. In the interest of time, I'll forgo all the jokes I had about economists. Before I jump into this, I do have several people that I need to thank for providing me with information and with assistance in preparing my talk today. And first and foremost among those is Chuck Keegan, my predecessor as Director of the Forest Industry Research Program and my mentor at the Bureau. I'd also like to thank Jason Brandt. He's the Assistant Director of Forest Industry Research. He's the mobile microphone man. And I'd also like to thank the Montana Manufacturing Extension Center engineers throughout the state, in particular Craig Worst, who handles Missoula and other western Montana counties. And today, I hope to communicate 3 points. One, that manufacturing is still economically important in Montana and in Missoula County. Second, that the forest products industry is important because it represents our operational capacity in Montana to manage our forest lands. And as Dick King kind of alluded to, and forests cover 20 million acres, or roughly a quarter of the state. And of course, the third thing I want to convey to people is the outlook for 2009. Good news first. This is part of my plan to win over your hearts and minds here. Looking at 2008, the first half of the year in particular was relatively good for most Montana manufacturers. 90% of Montana firms did not curtail production in 2008. Almost 80% reported no shortage of workers, and about 60% of firms said that their sales were the same or a little bit above what they were in 2007. And aside from forest products, there were few declines in manufacturing during 2008. Although, as Paul indicated, there were several layoffs and curtailments announced at year's end. U.S. manufacturing, the blue line on this figure, has been declining since 1990, whereas in Montana, manufacturing employment, the green line, has grown from 22,000 employees in 1990 to about 24,000 in 2008. In Montana, manufacturing is comprised of about 3,100 firms. That includes sole proprietorships and other firms that don't have any employees on a payroll. There are about 24,000 workers, as I mentioned, and about 90% of the firms have 20 or fewer employees. Manufacturing has $10 billion in annual sales in Montana and accounts for about $1.3 billion in labor income annually. So it's about 20 to 25% of the economic base in the state. Statewide, the largest sectors in manufacturing are shown on the pie chart, and you can see that wood, paper, and furniture are still the largest piece of the pie there at roughly 25%. Now, compare that to 10 years ago when wood, paper, and furniture was around 38%, and 20 years ago when it was about 49%. So we've had some trade-off. We've had this economic diversification in our manufacturing, which is probably a good thing, but that diminishing in size of wood products also represents a loss of capacity to manage our forest lands. Probably not such a good thing. Petroleum, coal, they represent about 17% there in the pie chart. Primary and fabricated metals together about 12%. I won't read them all off. There's food and beverage in there, high-tech, chemicals, and then there's other, which has quite a variety of things: textiles, clothing, transportation equipment, other miscellaneous types of equipment. And these largest sectors, they play even more important roles at the local or county level. And I'll shift gears here and talk about the Missoula situation. Missoula County, we estimate about 2,800 employees in manufacturing for 2008, about $143 million in labor income. So manufacturing represents about 15 to 20% of the economic base in Missoula County. By sector, we can see that here wood products, paper, furniture is also the largest sector. In Missoula, accounts for about 57%. So firms like Smurfit Stone, Roseburg, Pyramid Mountain Lumber, and as of 2008, Stimson lumber was still in here. And we also have a variety of secondary cabinets and furniture and other secondary wood products manufacturing. There's chemical. They represent about 13%. Things like Hexion, Diversified Plastics, makers of ready mix or cement. Food and beverage industry, one of my favorites. We have breweries of beer here in Missoula, which are great. Coca-Cola bottling, Big Sky bottling. There's meat processing and packing, and bakeries, and a variety of other food-related manufacturers. And then in the other category, it's a really diverse. Things like sporting goods, aircraft parts, guns and gun parts, printing and publishing, fabricated metals, and medical equipment. All right, let's get going into the outlook here. Each year, the Bureau of Business and Economic Research conducts a survey of manufacturers throughout the state. We contact folks in late November, December. We talk to the manufacturers. We ask them a series of open-ended questions and multiple choice or ranking type questions about the current year and about the coming year. This year in 2008, we contacted 216 firms, got responses from about 161, which gives us about a 75% response rate. And we contacted nearly all of the large manufacturers, that's folks with 25 or more employees. And we also got representatives of the smaller sectors and smaller employers. And much of the outlook that I'm going to go through here in the next couple minutes is based on the input that manufacturers throughout the state gave us. All right, kind of the darkest news is Montana's forest products industry right now. 2008 was the third straight year of substantial declines for forest products. In this graph, you can see that timber harvest was down. It was down about 16% from 2007. That's the yellow line is timber harvest. Product sales were also down. Employment was down. And lumber production was down. Lumber markets are very closely tied to the U.S. housing situation, U.S. construction. And on the figure, you can see the green line, that is U.S. housing starts. And you can see that throughout the 1990s, housing starts in the U.S. were increasing quite appreciably. And there's that divergence between what's going on in Montana in terms of the harvest level and what's going on in the rest of the country with housing starts and lumber consumption. And that divergence is due in large part to federal lands management, declines in timber harvest, particularly from national forest lands. And these are related more to policy and legal issues and weren't really market issues there. These figures do hint at what the forecast is for wood products. This slide shows the overall Montana Forest Products outlook for 2008 and 9. Montana wood folks were fairly pessimistic going into 2008, the green bars. 28% of the wood products firms expected 2008 to be better than 2007. For 2009, no, that outlook has grown substantially worse. Looking at the gray or the black bars there, we can see that only 6% of Montana wood manufacturers expect 2009 to be better than 2008. In terms of the employment outlook in wood products, wood products firms were pretty neutral about employment going into 2008. The green bar there, 74% expected no change in number of employees. Now, for 2009, that employment outlook is a bit more grim. The gray bar shows that only 6% expect to increase their employment, whereas almost 40% of Montana wood products manufacturers expect to reduce the number of employees in 2009. All right, this leads us to kind of the overall forecast for wood products in Montana. 2009 we expect to be worse than the past 3 years. We can expect more permanent closures and extended curtailments in wood products. Lumber production will probably be down 10 to 20% from 2008, and employment is probably also going to go down by 15 to 25%. Timber harvest volume is also expected to go down in 2009 and will probably be the lowest timber harvest volume since World War II. That's statewide. Montana manufacturing, we'll kind of shift over to the broader manufacturing picture here. In general, Montana manufacturers had a pretty positive outlook going into 2008. The green bars, again, the 2008 outlook. 80% expected 2008 to be better or the same as 2007. For 2009, again, that outlook has shifted. Almost 80% expect 2009 to be the same or worse than 2008, with the largest shift going into that worse than last year outlook. This slide shows manufacturing employment expectations for 2008 and 9. And again, Montana manufacturers generally had a pretty positive outlook going into 2008. 36% expected to increase their number of employees, and only 5% expected to reduce the number of employees. For 2009, that employment outlook is a lot worse, and this is probably weighted heavily by the wood products sectors. But we see about 1/3 of Montana manufacturers expect to reduce the number of employees. Statewide, the outlook, of course, is not quite the same as at the county level. In Missoula, almost 37% of Missoula manufacturers indicated that they did reduce employment during 2008, and while other sectors had modest increases. The outlook for 2009 for Missoula County manufacturing is slightly worse than the overall state outlook. In part, that is because of the large wood products influence in the county. About 42% expect a worse year than last year. The employment expectations as of November, December 2008 are about on par with this. 40% of manufacturers in the county were expecting to reduce their workforce, and only 10% were expecting to increase it. Which kind of brings us to the overall Montana manufacturing forecast for 2009. We have expectations of declines in the state. Some counties, particularly those with a large wood products component, will see substantial declines. Statewide manufacturing employment, conservatively, we are estimating a loss of 1,000 to 2,000 jobs this year. That's pretty much on par with what we saw during the 2000 to 2003 period, where manufacturing in Montana lost about 900 jobs per year. It's not nearly as bad as what we saw in the 79 to 82 period, where we were losing about 2,200 jobs per year. The number of Montana manufacturing firms expecting lower profits this year has doubled from previous years. 40% of firms expect lower sales in 2009 versus 2008. And the big one here to note is capital expenditures. When we conducted our survey of manufacturers, over 75% of manufacturers in Montana indicated that they expected to make no capital expenditures during 2009. And kind of on the bright side here, or some light at the end of the tunnel, is that there is some recovery expected to begin in 2010, thinking particularly about the U.S. housing situation. The forecasts I have seen for the nationwide picture show 2009 being the lowest year in housing starts, but with some increase during 2010, 2011, and into 2012. Of course, it'll be many more years till we can get back to the levels that we saw 2004 or 5. And with that, I thank you for your time and attention, and I will take questions because we still have negative 5 minutes. Thank you.
Questions for Todd? For manufacturing forest products? Okay, thank you again. We do have with us today more information on the local economy, and we've asked the Chamber of Commerce to step up, and we've been very pleased to partner with the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce on this program. They've been wonderful partners. And now to tell us a little bit more about what's going on in the local economy from their perspective, I'd like you to please welcome Tom Severson. Tom is VP of Community Bank and also is the chairman-elect of the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. Tom.
Morning. I realize I'll be the last speaker before lunch, so I will keep it brief. As you can probably tell by looking at me, I'm a huge fan of lunch. The Missoula Chamber of Commerce is the largest business organization in Missoula, with 950 members, business members, representing over 25,000 employees. Under Chad Bauer's leadership this year, the Chamber remains strong, and I'd like to share today a little bit about what the Chamber is doing for you in our local business economy. We continue to strengthen and grow this business organization. Due to our recent reorganization, both the governmental monitoring and membership dues benefits, we are successfully adding new members. In fact, December of 2008 was one of our largest membership growth months ever. Some highlights the last year include increased media coverage for our business members. The Chamber has built a great partnership with the media, and in this past year we have received our most press coverage compared to previous years. Some of the events and issues that were covered include the local option gas tax, the Broadway plan, the Chamber's annual banquet, a possible new exposition center here in Missoula, the auto industry, and here just this week the State of Missoula address. The Chamber is ensuring a strong business voice. The Chamber has strengthened our involvement in the political arena with the newly structured Governmental Affairs Committee. The newly formed committee is doing a great job with over 20 business members and 3 ad hoc members meeting twice a month. The committee has worked on many issues and projects over this short period of time, including updating and amending the Chamber's public policy manual, participating in the Chamber's joint policy statement with the 7 larger chambers in Montana to ensure good representation of business at the legislature. The Chamber has taken action on more than a dozen issues over the past 5 months and has surveyed out the Chamber membership on pressing issues, ensuring the Chamber is representing its members. Survey topics covered over the past year include the Bitterroot Ski Resort, airport use survey and regarding business travel, enabling legislation for the local option tax, the local option gas tax, East Broadway inclusion, transportation impact fee, and the lighting ordinance. Current issues and projects the Chamber is monitoring and working on. Some we have taken positions on, some we are at the table in the discussion representing our constituents, or business members, I should say. The ambulance ordinance, the rewrite of the sign ordinance, the local option gas tourism, or excuse me, the local option tourism tax, the local option gas tax, bear-proof garbage cans, a forest products initiative, and monitoring legislative bills impacting business, monitoring the Bitterroot Ski Resort, and monitoring local economics. Current project the Chamber is involved in includes this one. The Chamber has recently approved that our CEO start a community coalition to evaluate the building of an exposition center here in Missoula. We are proud to report that all economic driver organizations within Missoula have committed to participate in this process. Finally, the Chamber is strong. We're fiscally sound. We are representing our membership in a wide variety of business issues, and we continue to grow in number. There is strength in numbers, and during these challenging economic times, the Missoula Business Committee and the Chamber continue to stand together. So, thank you. If you have any questions, myself or Kim would be happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Tom. Questions for Tom? Lots of hot button issues you rattled off there. Rat-a-tat-tat. Questions for Tom or Kim? Kim Luttrell is President and CEO of the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. Either one would be happy to, maybe they wouldn't be happy to, but they'd answer the questions anyway.
I want to say something.
Oh, well, hey.
2 seconds. Kim Luttrell with the Missoula Chamber, and I'm going to take this opportunity real quickly to speak to a lot of businesses that have been members of our organization for longer than I've been there, which is 35 years. But one of the things we heard this morning was about the economy in the 70s. I was only 6 when I started at the Chamber in the 70s, but I do recall that what occurred during that time, and I wanted to share with you that at that time we were 450 members in the early 70s. During that economic downturn, we grew to almost 1,200 members. And the reason that I remember is because this community pulled together and we supported each other and we worked together when times were down. And so the Chamber has proven through those tough times that it was there, and I'm telling you today, we're starting out working with our members and you as businesses to enhance your benefits and to make sure during these tough times we can be there for you because you've been there through the good times for us. So if you're not utilizing all your benefits, there's a lot that we can offer you, and I hope that you stop by and see us. And the Exposition Center, even though it's a very much a passion of mine and a dream, I believe Missoula deserves a chance to bring sporting events, to bring large conventions, to have this place a destination once again. And I'm going to work my darndest to see that we have a chance to have a community discussion about it. And I'd ask all of you to join in that process because I think it could sure help this economy and diversify it a bit. So your Chamber's working for you, and we thank you for all your continued support. And thanks again for the university's support on this state of the economies today. Thank you.
Well, we've been hearing plenty from our speakers this morning about some of the challenges we face in moving the Montana economy forward. We'd like to return now to the theme of this year's Outlook program, Montana's Transportation Future, and introduce you to some of the people, one in particular, who are working right now on solutions to these challenges. The Montana Department of Transportation has key responsibilities for the state's highway system, rail system, and air service. MDT is intimately involved with transportation issues in every part of the state. We're extremely pleased to have with us now economists from the Montana Department of Transportation. Would you please join me in welcoming Hal Fossum? Hal.
Don't take mine.
Are these over? I'll figure it out.
Where is mine? Good afternoon. My name is Hal Fossum. I'm an economist with the Transportation Department. I bring apologies from Jim Lynch. He's been held close to home today by the legislative session, which is fairly unpredictable. He did want to be here, so apologies from him. Pat, thanks so much for putting together this program. It is always a pleasure. I've been involved with these Outlook seminars for years, but never from this side of the podium. It is good to be here. Steve Albert touched on a lot of the fundamentals of transportation in Montana today, and particularly he helped highlight some of the key roles of freight and the entire transportation system around the state. I'd like to focus my remarks around a couple of things that have put transportation needs very much in the news in recent days. I don't know another time that I've ever seen two transportation-related funding things on the front page of the paper in the same day, but that happened earlier this week. That is weird. But there are a couple of big reasons for that. One, of course, is the stimulus bill or the jobs bill or whatever we're calling it that's wending its way through Congress. I have put a little summary. I've got a few copies of a summary of the House-passed stimulus bill out on the table out here, and I hope you grab it if you're interested in it. But the other is the reauthorization bill, the federal transportation reauthorization bill. The current bill, Safety Loop, is due to expire in September of this year. So notwithstanding what happens with the stimulus bill, there is a major federal debate, national debate going on, and will ripen in the coming year regarding transportation and the future of the national systems. The needs are remarkably large. I want to try to set some background and about what some of those key issues are, because they're very meaningful to us in Montana from a statewide perspective, from an urban perspective, from a rural perspective. This is a very consequential debate, and you should care about it. Transportation is a lot in Montana. Of course, the transportation system encompasses rural and urban. It encompasses air, rail, pipeline, waterway. Not much in Montana, but we ship to water a lot. Highways, of course, urban systems, bicycle and pedestrian systems, all these things link together in a system. I think it's good to keep in mind that this has to be envisioned and maintained and developed as a system. Much of what the Department of Transportation is directly responsible for managing has to do with the highways. Our system is very large in Montana, 11,000 miles of rural and urban roadways. The state as a whole includes 70,000 miles. The lion's share of the traffic that we do see is on urban and MDT managed roadways. In terms of the budget, it's important to note that about 57% of our total revenue sources are federal. Montana is exceptionally reliant on federal funds. This is much more true here in Montana than in more urbanized states. The federal fuel tax revenues make up about 37% of our funding, and just a little bit less than 10% come from motor carrier permits and so forth. Annually, we put together planning documents like this one. I'm not going to talk about this or any particular project, but I want to bring your attention to the maps and resources that we've brought. There's a nifty little fast facts, transportation facts brochure out there. There are some maps. This is available online, and it is linked to a detailed listing of projects that we expect to happen on the highway system. roads and bridges in the next 5 years. Of course, this is more accurate in the near couple of years. It tends to be a little softer depending on funding and other factors. But in any event, these resources that are available to you, we're pretty darn good about getting things online, and so you can look for them. Now to the topic. Here are key national challenges that are essentially amount to, maybe not a perfect storm, but a pretty darned good one in transportation issues in America. These are national issues, all of them. First of all, on the left, the Highway Trust Fund, and I'll zoom in on each of these, but just in overview, the Highway Trust Fund is overcommitted. This was done on purpose by Congress, but it is overcommitted. It can no longer support the transportation agenda that we know we have. Second, in that picture in the upper middle, keep that in mind, keep that vision in mind when you hear the term congestion, because that's what most of the country views as congestion. This kind of picture is what is really being referred to in large part. On the right, we're seeing a peak and decline in total vehicle travel. And we can talk a little bit about that. And also inflation in this sector of the economy has been very large. Has taken a real bite out of what all transportation agencies can achieve within budget. Transportation, by the way, is a significantly large sector of the economy. It's about, depending on how and when you measure it, it's about 10 to 15% of the total GDP. That's a little bit bigger than education. It's a little bit smaller than healthcare. So transportation is a very significant fundamental sector of the economy. Okay, to this one. When Congress passed and adopted the Safety Lou, the current transportation authorization bill, they did this on purpose. This is not, they overextended the trust fund. They did hope that it had come out a little rosier than it has, but they knew that a fix would be needed, and last fall needed to boost up the revenue of that fund with an $8 billion general fund infusion. That's the first time that had ever happened. In any event, the Highway Trust Fund, which has for some years been our major source of funding for transportation at the national level, is now overextended, and we know it. This is a very, very interesting trend. I've only shown 10 years on this graph, but there are three stories here. One is the upward slope to the left-hand side of that graph. That upward slope, the increase in total vehicle miles driven in the United States has gone up at about that slope all the way back to the 1970s. That slope is a little bit faster than population growth and a little bit slower than income growth. So those things are key factors in total vehicle miles driven. In about 2005, we started to see that plateau, which was very unusual. And we can correlate that with the price of fuel. That correlates with about the $2.50 price tag. And then in the last year, something totally new happened. And that is that Americans started to drive less. This is not just trucking, it's personal vehicles. This graph reflects a 3.3% decline. In November, the year-over-year figures are a 3.5% decline. I've seen preliminary numbers for December, and that decline continues. So clearly this is not just fuel cost that is driving this behavioral change. It's something bigger. The economy has something to do with it. Fuel prices have something to do with it. But it seems to be a change in mindset in the American people. Here's what former Secretary of Transportation Mary Peters said about it. As driving decreases and vehicle fuel efficiency continues to improve, the long-term viability of the Highway Trust Fund grows weaker. The fact that the trend persists, even as gas prices are dropping, confirms that America's travel habits are fundamentally changing. The way we finance America's transportation network must also change. But she's a former secretary, so who cares, right? No, the point of it is people recognize at a national level that things are changing, and that those things will have mountainous effects on how we think about not only what we need to do by way of transportation, but how we finance that, okay? Now to inflation, there has been rapid, since 2004, there has been rapid inflation in our sector, highway and street construction, which is a lot of what drives our cost profile and many transportation departments. I don't show the trend lines before 2004. They were largely parallel to the general rate of inflation. But starting in 2004, we started to see rapid inflation. Steel went up more than double. Concrete went up 40%. It's down a little bit since then. Fuel, well, you know what fuel has done. It starts here in 2004 at about $1.75. Last summer we saw $4.25. Now it's back down. What is it today? Is it up to $1.60 yet this morning? No, $1.52. Fuel also, fuel drives a lot of costs of project directly, but also it's, we're concerned about one of the byproducts of oil is asphalt, and asphalt prices as well have gone up. Real estate costs affect transportation because of the purchase of right-of-way, and you know what that's done in urban areas, up about 40%. These figures on the lower right are Montana specific, the others are national. Up about 40%. The farmland prices have more than doubled. So rural and urban, we've seen a very significant bump in our costs of production, essentially. And the result of it is that we've lost a lot of purchasing power. And this purchasing power was essentially what we had planned to use to achieve the ends of Safety Lou, and all our transportation initiatives basically have taken at this point to year end about a 30% hit. Last summer it was over 40% in what could be achieved with the available funds. So it's not for the faint of heart. This is not a Montana specific trend. It's not a state specific trend. Every transportation agency nationwide is facing this kind of a construction cost bubble. This is the slide that says blah, blah, blah. There are different ways, transportation economics, oddly enough, is a fairly new field. Within the last 20 years or so, we have learned to actually measure the value of this very difficult to measure sector of the economy. Transportation in itself has no value. It's only valuable when it's used, and people value the transportation they use very highly. The first point goes to the economic productivity gains to producers and consumers of highway or transportation infrastructure investments. This estimate suggests that in the most recent period, the return on investment is about 14%, so pretty good. Historically, that rate was higher. Historically, that rate was quite a bit higher. In the 40 years ago, we would have seen about a 40% return on investment from transportation when the interstate system was going in, and that had such mountainous effects on the connectedness of economies and so forth. But in any event, current estimates are 14%. Second, the benefits to all users in terms of time and safety and wear and tear. Everybody who uses a street, road, sidewalk, airport, and so forth benefits from being able to get where they want, when they want, and to do so reliably, predictably, and safely, and economists do measure those impacts. The third is the one that we use least, actually, and that is the jobs impacts of, we do not count the jobs that we create in the work that we do, typically. In these times, we're very interested in it. Current federal estimates range from 28 to 41 jobs per $1 million spent would be generated by transportation investments. And this is, of course, something that's of great interest to us now as we're looking to get the economy rolling. This range reflects differences in how we measure, when we measure, and the assumptions that we make about the costs of inputs and our capacity to capture the benefits of that work. It's important to realize how dependent Montana is upon federal funds. I showed you the earlier pie chart. 57% of our total revenue comes from federal sources. In terms of our construction budget, Montana's construction budget, the proportion is quite a bit higher. It's about 1 to 6.7. So for every dollar the state of Montana puts into construction projects, we get about $6.70 of federal support. The graph on the left gives you another look at this. These green bars represent how much money 1 penny of gas tax raises in different states. In California, for instance, a penny of fuel tax raises $1.886 million. In Michigan, $58.5 million. In Indiana, $45.4 million. In Utah, $14.1. In Montana, $7.3 million. And I've selected these states because they're relatively comparable in the size of the highway system or the road network that these funds support. So, Montanans, even though we actually spend, on a per capita basis, pay more in fuel tax, there's just plain no way we could support a transportation system as we know it. Even as we know it, there's no way we could do it by ourselves. We rely on a shifting of funds from more populous areas to less. And this is true at the national scale. Other rural states are much in the same boat. Now to congestion, I asked you to keep in mind that picture of the metropolitan traffic jam. These couple of maps show congestion in 1998 and projected for 2020. 2020 is not that long, far away. The yellow and red colored corridors are essentially where we anticipate significant bottlenecks at the national scale. And as we talk about congestion in the nation, this is where we're talking about. There's a very, very significant push on the national level to focus lots of transportation resources on congestion, meaning these places. You can see where Montana and much of the upper Mountain West sits in this. We're just simply not on the radar. We're just simply not there. So, basically the point of it is if congestion is going to drive the allocation of federal transportation funds, Montana's share would round to zero. Today our share of transit funds, for instance, is about 0.8 mils. Our share of the total fuel, the federal trust fund, is about 1%. So, the focus on priorities is very, very meaningful for Montana, and this is why we tend to focus much of our talking points on the importance of the national system and on the statewide system. Okay. As we talk about transportation needs, the American public, taxpayers, you and me, are right to be concerned about the efficiency and the effectiveness of transportation programs. So that's why we like to brag a little bit in Montana about some of the good things that we do. So if you'll indulge me just for a moment, I'll try to move quickly through the brag part. Montana was ranked by the Reason Foundation in an annual study as, most recently, second in terms of overall performance and cost effectiveness of our work. North Dakota ranked first. Last year we were fifth. We tend to hover way up there in terms of the effectiveness and efficiency of our work. And I'll show you a little bit about how we do that. The systems that we've put in place are being replicated by other states, many other states. Also, we're a pretty well recognized nationally. Our planning and transportation development work is quite well nationally recognized, and I think that it's okay for you to know that. Asset management is what we tend to call our methods of trying to link our planning objectives with overall system performance. We do serious comprehensive planning. Our policy plans are embodied in what we call Tran Plan 21. We survey folks and gauge and keep track of satisfaction with the different elements of our system. We use those plans to come up with performance targets, and we have programs and processes that are designed to maximize the overall efficiency of our system, the overall quality of our system, and help us weigh different management alternatives. This slide shows you one scenario, one way that we've done that. This one shows how our overall highway performance would be if we allocated funds on the basis of population as opposed to how we do it now. So we do this across different systems, across districts, and it helps us allocate funds between different types of investments. Okay. The program and the approach is also designed to not allow us to exceed a poor quality of ride in any 10-year planning horizon of more than 3%. So using this, we've been pretty good at finding ways to allocate funds among construction and reconstruction, preservation, et cetera. We've been pretty successful at allocating funds between interstate and highway and secondary roads. Some things are not in this program, in this approach. Among them, urban funds. Those funds tend to be, are directed at the federal level. CMAQ funds, our congestion and air mitigation funds, are also not. Context-sensitive design is something that we've also been fairly well recognized for in the state. It's something that has been a real push at the national level. We've embraced that pretty heartily and with good results. This particular shot is in Helena. You'll see the Great Northern Town Center to the left there. Context-sensitive design entails working at the community level very early. It entails loosening up absolutes about what a design has to include. So it's a chance to put the engineers at bay. And it has to do with preserving, not just achieving transportation outcomes, but also being very attentive to environmental and cultural and historic and other kinds of assets. These shots are of the US Highway 93, which I hope you know, a road that I hope you know. I'm very proud of it. It's, I drive this road a lot, and boy, it's sure a better ride, isn't it? It was some time back. We discovered that we couldn't design this road without doing it in concert with the tribes there, and so we did. And it resulted in a remarkable blending of values that you see reflected in the signage and in the geometrics of that roadway. Its sensitivity to the environment. And also, it's good to note that this segment of road is absolutely cutting edge when it comes to wildlife crossing. Absolutely cutting edge. So We're proud of that one. It works in small towns too. This is a little community of Absorki, and this received fairly gushy national awards. It's kind of hard to believe. It looks like a street to me, but I guess this is not how other agencies do it. Boulder, I think that this is nice. You'll note that the sky gets bluer. It's true. This is Helena's North Main Street. Off to the left there is Memorial Park, if you know the territory, and off to the right in this picture is the Armory. This street has a lot of the similar role to your Brooks Street in terms of its function in the community. Really, it's turned out to be quite a lovely project. Another thing, I gloated about the Reason Foundation ranking as second in overall effectiveness and efficiency. That same study ranked us 50th in safety and fatality. We know that we have a very significant issue with highway traffic safety in the state. Fatalities are a big problem. One of the things that we've done about that is to put together a comprehensive highway safety plan. This plan engages folks at the interagency level, at the intergovernmental level, and we've got goals. Other agencies and partners are working with us and taking actual responsibility. There are good reasons, not good reasons, but there are reasons that we have safety problems in Montana. We're a large state, the most rural percentage of traffic in the country. It's the distance to emergency care providers is very high. The density of traffic enforcement is very low. In addition to that, we have weather. In addition to that, we've got lots of places where it's really hard to build a road, frankly. The Gallatin Canyon comes to mind, the Swan Valley comes to mind, the east shore of Flathead Lake comes to mind. There's lots of places where it's just plain hard to build a road. We've also worked with, what's going on here? It doesn't like me anymore. We've also, I don't care. We've worked very closely with the tribal governments and worked individually with the different tribes to develop culturally specific messages to improve traffic safety within the reservation lands and Indian country. Now, enough of the gloat. Focusing again on the big picture, one national commission, a pretty respectable commission, came to the conclusion in the last year that $225 billion per year would be needed through each year through 2055 to bring our nation's transportation system up to snuff. Not only to maintain what we've got, but to modernize it thoroughly. We know that we're way behind on urban systems, and that crosses modes, transit, worlds of opportunity in transit, worlds of opportunity and need in congestion relief, worlds of opportunity in rail, and need. I'm getting there, aren't I? So in any event, there are substantial needs in a wide spectrum of transportation systems that spans rural and urban, road, rail, intermodal, transit, and pedestrian. Essentially, the Highway Trust Fund is, if that's a 5-gallon bucket, $225 billion per year, that's a 13-gallon challenge. That's the scale of the mismatch. Now, you can think what you will about that agenda. I tend to think that it's pretty credible. It's pretty credible that we've got transportation needs on that scale. So, two major opportunities. One, the federal transportation reauthorization. You will be hearing about this past the time when the stimulus bill finally wends its way through Congress. We are very, very fortunate in Montana to have see, there it is, tribally specific messages. Recognized needs. Here we are, we're up to speed. we're very fortunate to have a congressional delegation that cares deeply about this, that understands its importance and role in Montana, and that is flagging it. Senator Baucus has been passionate about these issues for decades. I know that the whole delegation is and will be engaged. I hope that you give them your support because while we all have our opinions about overall transportation, they're really taking it to the mat. There are folks who say, Montana doesn't need one more road. You know, we hear that. And of course, they don't need us to have one more road. In any event, the federal economic stimulus is focused on jobs quick. It is a jobs bill. What shovel ready means is really a point of detail. That's whether it's obligated within 120 days, whether it's obligated within 90 days, whether it's exactly how that'll pan out remains to be seen, but we're paying very, very close attention to it. 100% federal match. This is significant to all of us who will use it. It'll probably be run through existing programs and will help clear the way for other projects and priorities. I think it's important to keep in mind that there are many projects, because of the various factors, including inflation, have really jammed up the pipeline. There are ready projects. Completing those things will help us identify and pursue other kinds of priorities as well as projects. I thank you for your attention. I hope I haven't gone too long. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, this is an opportunity. Does anyone want to have a reaction or comment or question for Hal?
Right.
How much dollars do you guys spend every day?
I don't know.
Any questions or comments?
Yes.
Question from one of our other presenters. Is that Rob?
About 70,000 miles of road in Montana.
Yeah.
Does that include roads on national forests?
Yes. That would include logging roads and alleys and the whole shoot and match. Everything that would be considered a public road, which is anything that's not fenced off or clearly prohibited for transportation.
Other questions?
Yes.
These shovel-ready jobs is any of them going to be in Missoula?
You know, I've been reading the press on that question. Oh yeah, any of the shovel-ready jobs, will they be in Missoula? Well, there are a couple of things that I want to emphasize. One, that I don't know what the list is. People talk about the list. It's a worksheet. It's really not in state control. People sometimes talk about the state, federal, and local governments haggling over this, and it's not true. It's a federal matter. Will any of them be in Missoula? I've read the same news you have about what's considered ready in terms of a project ready to actually go to contract within 90 or 100 days of getting the money. And you know, I share your concern. Heck, I'm an old Missoulian. I grew up here. So you know, I'd love to see it work out as well as it can for this city. Yes? I remember it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that an equitable allocation, particularly when you're talking about return on investment for transportation projects? We're an economic driver. Why are we not maintaining this hub?
Well, I really do appreciate the point about return on investment. It's one of the things that I tried to emphasize in this presentation is that, you know, these challenges have a lot to do with the limitations of what we can do under existing budget. You know, I hate to say things are tough all over, but things are tough all over. That's one thing. Another is that there is always, I mean, Sydney wants a bigger share of the fuel, excise tax, as does cold strip. These things do happen at the national or at the state level, and I also tried to impress upon you that if we're looking, other states are making a forceful case that they should get the tax that they paid. And under that scenario, Montana would be in very tough shape. I understand that Missoula and other places in the state, the urban territories, have a strong case to make for system development, urban-focused system development. Personally, I hope that could develop too. Yes? You? Sure.
Montana receives $2.30 for every dollar that it pays in gas tax. Missoula, we get about 70 cents for every dollar. So I guess I empathize with taxes with other areas. They don't feel like they're getting a return on what they're paying.
Yeah, I've seen those figures. I haven't really dissected them. I'd like to know what kind of analysis went into that and how big an area. Certainly, you're not talking about moving to wagon ruts 10 miles out of Missoula, and I don't think anybody's suggesting so. But all cities make their place because they're connected to elsewhere. We all rely on the linkages among places. We all do. And that's not just at the urban scale. Missoula and all cities absolutely rely on connectedness. And in our situation, Montana is still a relatively remote state in this nation. So I'll stick with what I said about the importance of connectedness and these national systems.
One last question?
With sympathy to your point.
Over here.
As an educator, one of our biggest concerns daily is high school dropout rates.
Yes.
And I am wondering if the Montana Department of Transportation has been involved in the efforts to correlate the driver's license to school and elementary school, or has there been any pressure on legislators?
I haven't heard of such a policy initiative. It certainly is intriguing, isn't it? I just have to confess that it's not an area of expertise of mine. I'm sure that somebody's thought much more than I have about that, and I see that you're one of them. Thank you. Any further questions?
Oh, yeah, one more question.
Yes.
You actually always wondered this about the cost comparisons for, you may not know so much about unit costs for railroad rates, but I'm curious about more of a long-term sustainability picture for U.S. interstate system in our neighborhoods in terms of, as we continue to grow in the systems, can we manage the costs over time? We may be able to find a solution for this year and next year, but in the long term, can we keep up with the kind of materials and labor that are required to manage rails? And along those lines, what could you buy with the same amount of money in terms of managing some kind of railroad infrastructure? You buy a lot more distance in infrastructure on railways in terms of an alternative more European style system than you can with managing the world's largest transportation.
Yes. To synthesize, wouldn't it be more cost-effective over the long term to look toward a rail system rather than a road network? It is true that we've really committed ourselves over the last many years to a roadway network and that modus of connecting places. I think that to the extent that we see an evolution in this, it will be an evolution in our systems. The roadway network is an extraordinarily flexible tool for transportation. It is an extraordinarily flexible tool and one that has enabled Montana to grow as it has. We're very well aware of the connections between transportation systems and land use patterns. Land use patterns, by the way, are entirely regulated at the local level. State and federal government have nothing to do with them. And it's important to keep that in mind as we look toward evolving new potentials in transportation systems, the importance of local work in land use planning and control. That linkage between transportation and land use is very, very important, and I think may be a big piece of the puzzle as we move toward alternative forms of development in our transportation system. I hope that's begun to answer your question. I see that we're out of time. I know that you guys have to get back to work. I appreciate your attention and being here in Missoula. Thanks.
Thank you, Hal. Hal may be available for just a couple minutes outside in the hall. I saw a couple more hands up. If somebody wanted to grab you, that would be the chance. This concludes our program. Thank you for your attendance. Don't forget the evaluation sheets. Good luck. Have a wonderful year, and we'll see you in 2010, if not before.